You will have noticed possibly that the session is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch this back if you miss something, no problem. Welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We have a session for you today that should take about 45-ish minutes. And in that time, we'll talk about the importance of metadata, although if you're joining today, hopefully that means you already care about metadata, which is great. We will demonstrate our participation reports tool for you. We'll look at a few examples. We'll also encourage you to look at your own participation report and understand what it means. And then we'll have a look at our new helper tool for journal article content registration that we launched a few months ago. I'll tell you a bit about that tool, how it helps you improve your scores in your participation report if you're registering journal content. And then at the end, we'll have a lot of time for your questions. If at any point while I'm talking you think of a question, just put it in the Q&A. We'll get to it either right then or when it makes sense. Speaking of Q&A, I think a lot of you will already be familiar with Zoom, but you'll see probably not all, but some of these options at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat feature and there's a Q&A feature. Great to say hello in the chat and have a conversation there. If you have questions, it's best if you put them in the Q&A so that we definitely don't miss them and they don't get lost in the chat. So, hi everyone. My name is Lena. I work on the programs and services team at Crossref. I am joined today, among others, but as my main support today by Luis Montilla, who's on our community team, and Patrick Vale, who's a senior front-end developer. I'm sure they're doing a wave, but they have their cameras off because I am your main presenter for today. Oh, there's the wave. Okay. Hi, Patrick. Luis, yeah. Just in case we need any tech support to make sure that we catch all of your questions. There's 3 of us with you today, and we'll be happy to get your questions and help you make the most of your metadata. So let's start with the basics. What do we mean when we say participation? So you can participate in Crossref by registering unique DOIs for each item that you publish. You'll probably be doing this already. You also provide a rich metadata record alongside those DOI identifiers. And you should be displaying the DOI on a unique landing page for each published item. And you should also keep the associated metadata record up to date, which can mean that you add more richness to the metadata over time, or you simply keep it updated to reflect reality as time goes on. And what metadata are we talking about here? There is a basic bibliographic metadata record, much of which is required for you to be able to register a DOI in the first place. So think things like titles, contributor names, that kind of thing. There are separate metadata fields as well in our input schema for full text URLs for different applications, such as text and data mining or similarity check if you happen to use that Crossref service. We also have a service named Crossmark, which allows you to record updates, retractions, corrections to your content. And in order to participate in Crossmark, you have to link each of your metadata records to an update policy that states how you go about registering updates for your content. We also encourage you to register relationships between content items. So things like translations, different versions of a work, citations between works. You can also register some metadata about provenance, which means where a work comes from, such as who has funded it, for example. You can uniquely identify funders who have funded a work by registering funder registry IDs and also award numbers and grant IDs, which is a type of DOI, which specifies a specific award that has funded a work. And finally, what's really important for researchers is contributor and affiliation metadata. We encourage all of our members to collect ORCID IDs from authors when they submit works, and then register those ORCID IDs with Crossref, as well as affiliation metadata, for which we favor raw IDs. RAW is the stands for the Research Organization Registry, which provides unique persistent identifiers for any research producing organization. You can learn more about this by going to raw.org. That's ror.org. I can actually post this in the chat now for you to see. Yes, that's a great way to clearly disambiguate where your contributors work and do their research. So now you have some idea of the kinds of metadata that make up a rich record. And all of this together helps our community to build what we like to call the research nexus, of which there is a nice image on screen now. The research nexus is a rich and reusable open network of relationships that connect research organizations, people, things, and actions. So you can see here all of the different things that make up research and that are done to research, all interconnect to form this full image of the research world. And we make the metadata that you register with us openly available so that this research nexus can be a scholarly record that the global community can build on forever for the benefit of society. If you're still not convinced why this is important, the metadata that you deposit with Crossref is used downstream by many different organizations and researchers through our open APIs. The primary users of the metadata that is deposited with us by our members are actually our members themselves. So it may well be that your organization actually makes use of the metadata in Crossref already for various applications. There are also a lot of third-party tools and systems that support, for example, content discovery or bibliographic management metrics and reporting, those kinds of things that rely on Crossref metadata. So by registering a rich metadata record with us, you're doing a service to the wider scholarly community, but you're also putting your content in a good position to be discovered and to be used by the rest of the world. And most people understand this in principle, but it's a very different thing to actually see a visual representation of your contribution and how you participate in Crossref and the Research Nexus. And that's why we've developed the participation reports tool. Yeah, and it would be great if one of my glamorous assistants could share the link to this tool in the chat now, because we should get into it. Thank you. I would encourage you to go to this link and find your Crossref member organization by typing its name in the field in the center of the screen. It should look something like this. I'll stop sharing my screen now for a second or I can just go straight to the link that Lewis shared, because I'd like to show you the actual tool rather than just a screenshot for a minute. And I will give you a few seconds to try and find your own participation report. I hope you can all still see my screen and see me on this tool now. If you're not able to find your member organization, that might be because you're not searching for the member name that we at Crossref have on record. In most cases, it won't be, for example, your journal title that you should be searching for, but rather the institution or the library or the publisher or other organization name that the journal belongs to. Let's have a look at an example. But yeah, let us know if you're able to find your participation report. Each of these looks different depending on which member you select. For example, here I have an institutional member for which I have accessed the participation report. And oh, okay, we have a question in the Q&A for the link to participation reports. You can find it in the chat, but I'll also copy it in. Yeah, okay, somebody else is already doing it, copying it in here for you so you can access it. Great. Once you've selected your member, you'll get to a page that looks a bit like this, except probably with different scores. You can always see the proportion of the selected member's content that contains one of these 11 key fields in the metadata. You will always see near the member name at the top of the screen a total of the total number of records, registered content items that we have in our database for this member. And there's also a breakdown further below of the different types of records that we have for the member. Most, not absolutely all, but most content types that you can register with Crossref are represented in the participation report. Some of the most common ones are here in this example. Journal articles, of course, are by far the most common type, but also preprints, conference papers, books chapters. Your breakdown will be different for your member depending on what you've registered with us before. And by default, when you first access this page, it will show you the coverage scores for journal articles, because that is the most commonly registered content type. But you can change here at the top left in this drop down to see what the scores are like for different content types. So if I want to know what this member's books have in their metadata, then I can just change the selection here, and you'll see the scores have changed. And you'll also see, because books don't have all of the same metadata fields available as journal articles, for example, you can't register funding metadata currently for books. Those fields are not being displayed if I change this filter here. But let's go back to journal articles because it gives you the complete picture. There is also at the top right another drop down here, and this is often a cause of confusion when members first look at their scores in the participation report, because by default you will see current content here, which means anything that was published in this calendar year or the previous 2 calendar years. So right now that means anything that was published starting from 2023 will count as current content. But you can also change this to look at backfile content, which is anything published before 2022 right now, and often has lower coverage scores for a lot of metadata fields. Or you can change it to all time to see the complete corpus of all of your journal articles or other content types and see how you do. And then lastly, if you're looking at journal articles, there is another search field here in the middle where you can search for a specific journal title and see the statistics just for that title, which might be interesting to some of you who are primarily interested in one journal. For technical reasons, you can only find journals here that have an ISSN and where the ISSN is registered with Crossref. But again, if I select an example here, this is a single journal title of this member, you can see the scores change down here, and they will show me just the statistics for this one journal. So that is the basic functionality of participation reports. I hope many of you have been able to follow along and see for yourself what your scores look like, and you might have some questions about them. Let us have them if you do. In the meantime, I will go back to my slides and talk a little bit more about what each of these fields are about. So this is just a different example, a screenshot of a member with very high coverage scores, and a few of the things that I've already shown you. Okay, maybe I should just stick with one of these. So the most important part, possibly, of your participation report, this first field here, is the references. The idea of reference linking is actually where Crossref originally started. And if you recall that image I showed you earlier of the research nexus, then obviously citations between works are a very fundamental way that two pieces of research can be connected in the world. So that's why references are in first place here. Abstracts, including an abstract in your open metadata, is a great way to improve the discoverability of research, because a lot of downstream services that I already mentioned before rely on this data to serve up relevant content to their users. We've already mentioned contributor ORCID IDs before. By the way, Crossref also has an auto-update integration with ORCID, which means that when an author ORCID ID is included in the metadata of a work, then we as Crossref can send a notification to that author via ORCID to let them know that this has happened. And if they give us permission, then we can automatically update their ORCID record and add this work and any future works to their ORCID record and keep the metadata up to date in there, so that authors don't have to manually curate their own ORCID records and make sure they're up to date. That's why ORCID IDs are important. A relatively recent addition to the participation reports interface are these two fields. Last year, we added here the display of coverage scores for author affiliations and ROR IDs. There's more here, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that for now. If you want to find more information about any of the fields, you can hover or click on these little eye icons, and there'll be more information and links to our documentation on how you can improve your score. But we will spend some time talking about that now as well. It may be that you have in your own participation report one specific gap that surprises you. For a lot of members, we find that affiliations and funding metadata are commonly missing fields, and you don't always have them. But maybe there is something where you're thinking, wait, I know for a fact that I already collect this metadata. Why isn't it here? In that case, it could be that you're not sending us that metadata, or you're not sending it correctly. We might be able to support you in figuring out why that's happening. So that was the basic instructions on participation reports. I will take a quick break from sharing these slides now, just to see whether we have any questions that are unanswered. It doesn't quite look like it yet, which is great. I'm glad I'm being clear. Because all this talk of improving your scores leads me nicely into the second half of what we wanted to talk about today. Looking at your participation report and understanding how you're contributing is great, but you also want to know how to be even better, unless you're at 100% for everything already, which is great, but I think almost no one is. There are different ways in which you can improve your scores. How exactly you do that depends on how you're registering your metadata records with us. We have a number of different ways of doing that. And there's in our website documentation, you can find a flowchart to help you decide what the best method is for you. Many of our members use manuscript tracking and management software that has an existing Crossref integration or a plugin, such as OJS. In that case, the member typically just has to get everything set up in that system by entering the Crossref account credentials and so on, and then the system sends metadata automatically to our deposit system in XML format. Some members also create their own XML files, and they either upload them in our admin tool or they send them to us via HTTPS post. But there are also many of us who are not that comfortable with XML. And for those members, we have what we call our manual helper tools, which let you enter your metadata in a more human-friendly way, in a like any other form that you encounter online. And then in the background of those helper tools, that data gets converted into XML format and sent to our Crossref system and registered. I'm sure some of you are familiar with our trusty old web deposit form, which accepts metadata for a range of content types, including journal articles, but also books and conference papers and others. But our focus today, as indicated by this subtle red square, is our newest helper tool, which is a more modern record registration form. We first launched this just over 2 years ago, I think, to allow members to register their grant records without having to touch XML. But now, as of last September, we've also created a version of that form that allows you to register journal articles with rich metadata, and I would love to tell you a little bit more about that. As a general note on adding missing metadata, in order to improve your score for an element, obviously the first and easiest thing you can try and do is to include that element in all of your future record registrations going forward. And in our new helper tool, just as in the web deposit form, you can also go back to previous records and re-register each record one by one by just adding all of the previously registered metadata again and adding whatever else you can to make the record richer. This new tool also allows you to download a copy of your record in JSON format after you've submitted it, and you can keep it on your computer, and it contains all of the metadata you've entered, and you can reload it into the form later on to pre-fill the form with all of that registered data, and so you don't have to retype it all, and you can make any changes or additions to it and resubmit later to make it richer. You can find the new tool that I'm talking about at this link, which I'm sure will be shared in the chat in short order. You should note that no matter what way you use to update your metadata on an existing record or to add new ones, it doesn't matter which tool you use, it can take some time, potentially up to 24 hours, for all of the changes you make to be reflected in participation reports. That's just a technical thing. The data needs to make it all the way through our systems to our APIs to end up in the participation report. So you can't necessarily do it live, update your records and see the scores go up immediately. It takes a little bit of time, so have a bit of patience. But now back to our new tool. Those of you who have experience with our web deposit form, you'll be familiar with the general concept of a web form to enter your metadata into. But this new form has a number of key advantages over the web deposit form. First and foremost, it lets you submit the reference for your journal articles, the references, as well as affiliation metadata, including the persistent ROR IDs from all within one tool. It also does a lot more than the web deposit form to check your inputs and make sure that what you've entered is valid before submitting it, so that anything that's going to get rejected anyway by our deposit system, things like ORCID IDs that don't have the number of required digits or other copy paste errors, can be caught early on, and you don't get your whole submission failing because of an error you made earlier. And um, if you want to retroactively update anything on a lot of your records, you can also do that in bulk using our web deposit form. We're not going to go into that in detail now, but because we're trying to focus on our new tool, just one last point on that. If you don't have an ISSN for your journal, then you have to keep using the web deposit form for now. You can't use the new tool yet for technical reasons. But I think most of you have journal ISSNs. So while Patrick answers that question in the Q&A, let's get into it and just look at a few examples of these different fields in the participation report and how you enter them in our new tool. And I'll go back to my slides and screenshots in a minute, but just like we did with the participation reports, it might be nice to look at a quick live demo of this tool. So what happens when you go to this link is that you sign in with your Crossref account credentials, just as you would anywhere else in our admin tool or any of our other tools in the Crossref ecosystem. And you select new record, and then you'll see, as I mentioned before, that there's currently two different work types that you can select from. We are talking about journal articles now. And then if you continue, you're taken to a form with 3 basic steps where you can enter the metadata of your article, then your journal, and the issue and volume if you want to include that metadata. Then you can check that everything looks correct and then submit to our system. So if I scroll through this first article page, and you can also do this yourselves at the link that was shared if you have a Crossref login, you will recognize a lot of the fields that we've already been talking about today in the context of participation reports. ORCID IDs, abstracts, funding metadata. So a very rich selection of fields available here. If I go back to my slides, some examples of how specific metadata elements are added in this form. For references, I already mentioned this before, they're really key to building the research nexus, and we have a field built into this form, unlike the web deposit form, where you can just paste your article's reference list. It looks like this at the bottom of the article page. If you've used our simple text query tool or OJS, for example, to deposit references before, then you'll be familiar with the need to make sure that each reference starts on a new line so that it can be matched correctly to existing records in the Crossref database and make those links between works and build those relationships. If you want to add abstracts to an article, you can simply type the abstract text into the abstract field here. You can also select the language that the abstract was written in. By default, this is set to English because that is the most commonly used language of the content that's registered with us, but the tool supports lots and lots of languages, and you can even enter multiple abstracts in different languages for the same work by clicking Add New here. Some of the elements that relate to authors, ORCID IDs, affiliations, ROR IDs, those can all be entered using, using this new tool. I've accidentally scrolled a bit far here. Here we go. Yeah, when you add a contributor using this tool, you can input their ORCID ID, you can choose their affiliation directly from the raw database, which looks like this. You can see here I've entered the name of an institution, and there are multiple matches in the research organization registry, and I can choose the correct one from it in order to send the unique identifier for it along with my metadata. Funding data deposit is also built into the tool. We very briefly saw this already before. You can input here from the Crossref Open Funder Registry an identifier. We don't really have time to talk about that in detail now, what that is, but you can find out more in our documentation. Soon you will also be able to instead select a funder from the raw database, just like I just showed you for affiliations, which will mean that you no longer have to look up what this long funder identifier here is, and you can just type in the funder's name and have a unique identifier sent automatically. But watch this space for more details on that. It's a very new development in our input schema, which is exciting. Yeah, I've already mentioned this. Great. Crossmark metadata cannot currently be registered with this new tool yet. We're working on this, but not yet. You can add Crossmark metadata already to your records by using the trusty old web deposit form. This is what that looks like. A lot of fields. If you're using Crossmark, hopefully you already know how to do this. But yeah, we're working on building this into this new tool as well. That is a gap we still have related to the participation reports scores. License URLs and similarity check URLs. There is simply fields for those in this new tool. It's just a place where you can enter the correct URLs for that purpose, and then they will be counted in your participation report scores. And then lastly, there are also text mining URLs reflected in the participation report. That is the other gap apart from Crossmark metadata that we currently have in this new tool. If you do provide links for text and data mining bots to access the full text, then you can upload those in bulk using a spreadsheet in our web deposit form. You don't have to go into each record individually to add them. You can do this for lots of records at a time. There is a link here, which I think we can also share in the chat, that explains to you how to do that using the web deposit form, regardless of how you initially registered the rest of your record. Okay, so that was a lot of information to go through just to get you started. I think the best way to understand how this new tool works is to try it out for yourself. You can go to this link to do that. Like I said, sign in with your regular Crossref account. Just do what the form tells you to do. If you have a journal article to register, whenever you're ready, we would be delighted if you gave it a try. You might have seen in the interface that it says that the tool is in beta. What that means is just that it's fully functional. You can use it just like you would the web deposit form or any other tool to register your article metadata. We're still building functionality for it. It's only been live for a few months, and we're in a period now of ensuring that it meets our members' needs. That's why we're still calling it beta, because we're having a lot of active feedback loops with members to understand how it works for them. And if you'd like to help us do that, please do try it out. Let us know what you think. You can do that via the interface itself. There is a feedback link in there. Or even better, you can go to our community forum, which you will find a link for in the chat as well. Our community forum is a great place to engage with us, but also with each other and the wider Crossref membership. There's already a long forum thread in the forum about feedback for this new tool specifically, but you can also start new threads about any other topics related to Crossref or metadata that are close to your heart. And this is a great way of doing that. Other places to get help if you're stuck with anything, this tool or any other one, is to check out the documentation on our website. You can, as I just said, talk to us and each other at the community forum, or you can get in touch with our support team directly via the contact page on our website. And I think this is a good time for me to be quiet for a minute and see what questions we've had so far that um, our helpers have not answered yet. I think there's a few left. Some in the chat and one in the Q&A. First question from Andreas is the workflow for a new journal issue would be register the new journal volume in the old web deposit form and then add articles in the new tool. You don't have to do that. You don't need to register a journal or journal volume as a separate record in order to register a journal article. If you do want a DOI for the journal and or issue, then yes, you have to do that in the web deposit form. If you're primarily interested in registering the article, you can do that without a journal DOI as long as you have an ISSN. You can just enter the article metadata in the new tool, find your journal. I didn't show this, but there is on the journal page of the form, there is a lookup where you can enter your journal's ISSN and then find the journal title. And if that's the right one, then you can register your article into that journal without having to have a separate record for that and register the article like that. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit complicated, the topic of title level records, but they're not necessary in order to register an article. Ingmar says something which is very true, which we are also very much thinking about and working on. It would be nice to be able to retrieve registered data by specifying a DOI to pre-fill the tool and then append or update this without the JSON file. You are 100% right. That would be great. And we are looking into different ways of best doing that right now. It's a little bit of a technical challenge because the format of records is slightly different between when you first send them to our input registration system and when they come out the other side in our APIs. So there's a bit of matching of fields and conversion that needs to happen there. So it's not totally simple, but it is our goal to, unlike the web deposit form, to allow you to actually access anything that you've registered before and just make changes easily so you can make your records as rich as possible rather than having to retype things. You're totally right. And keep an eye on our community forum and other places so we can let you know when we can allow you to do that with this tool. Very good point. And then we have a couple more questions in the chat. Somebody asks about the metadata manager tool. Will it be closed eventually? Would you recommend dropping it completely? Yes, the metadata manager tool will go away. It hasn't been actively supported for a few years now. There's a number of problems with it, both technical and in terms of usability, but primarily it has a lot of bugs that we're not able to fix, and it has always cost us a lot of effort to try and support it. So it will be sunset, it will go away at some point, potentially this year. We'll still announce it when we know for sure what's going to happen. We already don't recommend using Metadata Manager anymore to our members, especially new members, because we can't fix it if anything goes wrong with it. So yes, I would recommend dropping it. I know that's not as straightforward for members who have been relying on it for a long time for their workflows. So we're trying to allow you to do the things that you do in Metadata Manager as well as possible in this new tool. Like I said, we're still working on functionality to make sure that's the case. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking into the alternatives, such as this new form, to make sure that you can keep up your workflow in a very similar way once Metadata Manager goes away. Then we have another question about books and book chapters. which is everyone is reading my mind today, which is something that we are planning to work on later this year. It is another very commonly used content type by our community, and it's possible to register book and book chapter metadata with the web deposit form, which is not going away anytime soon. But we know the web deposit form has its problems too, and is not very easy to use. So yes, we also want to build one of these tools for books and book chapters. I can't give you a specific date for that yet, but keep an eye on our announcements because we will be working on that as one of our next things. And I think somebody also asked the same question about different record types, reports, for example. We basically, our plan is to support as many as possible, if not all of our content types in this new tool, and have it be the one-stop shop for registering your records. We don't know yet exactly in what order we'll do that after journal articles, books, probably conference proceedings and papers, because that's another quite commonly used work type. Where reports fall in that order, I don't think I can honestly tell you yet, but it is in the longer term plan, definitely. I see something else popping up in the Q&A about titles and abstracts in different languages. The tool does support registering abstracts in different languages already. Titles are not that simple, even in our input schema, as far as I'm aware. It's actually not that straightforward to do this currently, but multilingual metadata is one of the focuses that our metadata team currently have in terms of developing the next versions of our schema, which will make it easier to register multilingual titles. And once the way that we've built this new tool is that it is based directly on our schema instead of everything being manually purpose-built. So whenever there is an update to our schema, it's a lot easier for us to adjust this tool to reflect that and to always be at the cutting edge of what our input schema allows you to do. So when that multilingual metadata update goes out, probably later this year, and we change the way that you can register multilingual metadata, then this new tool will be adjusted to work with that very soon, and hopefully allow you to also register multiple titles. What you can already do if it's not one and the same article that you're registering, but it's an article and its translation, which would also be cited separately and have separate DOIs, then you can just register two records with those separate titles, because they won't be one and the same citable item. But I understand that even if you if you publish a single article in multiple languages within the same article, or even if it's just one language, you want to be able to register multilingual metadata for discoverability. That's a very common request we get from members, and yeah, we're hoping to be able to allow multilingual titles alongside the abstract that you can already do it for very soon, but not quite yet. Okay, I think we are perfectly on time. You can get one or two last questions in if you want. But then there's also, I've given you a lot to digest and to look at and to try out for yourselves. Like I said, find us on the community forum or elsewhere and keep the conversation going. But we might close out this session for now. The link to the recording, great question. will be emailed to everyone who's signed up for this. We also have a webinar and community events page on our website where the recordings are normally posted, but all of you who are here will receive that by email, and you can watch it back. I know I speak quickly sometimes. Sorry for that. We had a lot to get through. Really appreciate so many of you coming today and asking so many great questions. Hope to see you again soon at one of our community events. We will leave it there and hope we hear from you about what you think of this new tool. Have a very good rest of your day or evening if you're in Hong Kong or Brisbane. See you soon. Thank you very much for being here.